In this episode, we talk to YouTube personality 22plinkster. He explains how he went from a security system installer to currently having over 700,000 YouTube subscribers. We also find out what his most difficult shot to date has been and how it inspired confidence in him to continue to do what he does today. As always, if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, please hit us up at podcast@volkortson.com. This is the No Excuse to Miss podcast. Welcome back to the No Excuse to Miss podcast. I'm your host, Scott Volkortson. This week's guest is someone that has turned his hobby into a side hustle, and that side hustle eventually became his career. If you are into shooting videos, and in particular trick shooting videos, there's a good chance you have seen a few of his, as he has over 700,000 subscribers on YouTube. Welcome to the show, 22plinkster. How are you doing,
Scott,
sir?
how are you doing?
I am good. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Now, hey, let's get something straight. How do you properly pronounce your last name? I've known you for now, 8 years, 9 years?
It all depends on the day.
It all depends on the day, because I say Volkortson. I guess that's that's kind of a southern, just let's throw a bunch of syllables together and make it sound like it. But how did you just say it again, like when you did the intro?
Volkortson.
Volkortson. So it's you pronunciate Vol.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know if that's right.
I don't. Well, it's your name. You can pronounce it however you want to pronounce it, I guess. So, but I say Volkortson, but you say Volkortson. I don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on that rant, but my ADD caught that, and I'm like, we need to talk about that.
We say it differently even within our family. My grandparents said it differently than my dad did, and I say it differently than they do. So, it's one of those things I've been called much worse. So if you get it close, I'm good.
I'll just call you Scott. How about that?
That'll work too. So let's get into this a little bit. First, how did you get into, I've always been curious, I don't think I've ever asked you, how did you get into shooting to start with? And in particular, where did you see the market for trick shooting, or what inspired you to start doing the trick shooting?
Well, I've been shooting since I was 5. My dad was not a recreational shooter. There was no such thing as recreation shooting or competitive shooting. That was a waste of ammo for my dad. My dad did not believe in wasting ammo at all. He was a stickler for, hey, I'm buying you a box of 50 rounds of 22, and that needs to be 50 squirrels. That kind of a thing. Missing was not in his vocabulary. And I remember the first 22 or first gun I ever shot. I was 5. We just got back from a squirrel hunt, didn't see any squirrels, and Dad wanted me to shoot. I begged him I wanted to shoot the rifle. I never shot that rifle before, and I think it was a Weatherby Mark II, if I remember correctly, and beautiful rifle. This would have been probably about 1984. Yeah, probably 1984, and he set a golf ball up at about 40 feet. I put the scope right on it, leaning the rifle against his knee. We were sitting down, and I hit the golf ball, and I knew I was hooked at that point with shooting. But Dad just didn't let me shoot anytime I wanted to, because he did not like to waste ammo. So I was taught, what you shoot at, you hit it. And if you don't hit it, you quit shooting. So he was a stickler for marksmanship. He fired expert in the Army. He was in the Army. He fired expert in rifle and pistol, and he was one of the best shots I've ever seen. Now he's almost 80 years old, and his frail and weak body doesn't allow him to shoot like that anymore, but he still likes to come out and shoot with me every once in a while.
Oh, that's awesome. So, yeah, you've been doing this a long time.
Yes. I made my first YouTube video probably about 10 years ago, 10 years ago, and it was all on a dare. It was never, I never in a million years dreamed or even wanted to have a YouTube channel. 10 years ago when I watched YouTube, it was to watch kitten videos or watch the fail videos, people falling off skateboards or rope swings and stuff like that. It was strictly for entertainment. I never used YouTube for any kind of educational or to learn anything. It was I just want to laugh. Let's click on a YouTube video. I remember when YouTube was first coming out, I remember just searching on the YouTube search box, funny videos. That's all I wanted to watch. It was nothing. I didn't want to learn anything, you know. But how it all started with me was a common friend that we now have, Mr. Dustin Ellerman, was on the show Top Shot.
Yes.
And this was before this was probably about 5 months before I started my YouTube channel. And well, I guess it was a couple of months before I started my YouTube channel. Well, Dustin hit the golf ball at 100 yards with a 22 Vakortsen. Okay, right then and there on that show was the first time I ever heard the word Vakortsen. And I was thinking to myself, I really want one of those rifles, but I don't even know how to pronounce it correctly. You know, and I was like, you know, he pulled off an amazing shot with it. And I kind of left it as that. You know, I kind of saw that rifle back then as something that was out of reach. I had 2 small kids, working 3 jobs, and I was just settling for a baseline Ruger 1022 at that point. So, you know, me and my buddy, you know, a couple weeks later, we were talking about the shot, and my buddy grew up where I live, and he was in Florida, stationed in the Navy there. And we were talking about that shot that Dustin pulled off, you know, shooting the golf ball at 100 yards with that Vakortsen rifle. And he was like, man, that was the biggest luck shot I ever saw in my life. I'm like, well, actually, it's not. I'm like, if you have the right setup, you take the time and you're a good shot and you have, you know, the right ammunition. I'm like, that's not really that difficult of a shot. You know, it's a little bit over an inch at 100 yards. And he was like, oh, there's no way you could hit a golf ball at 100 yards with a 22. And I'm like, you grew up with hunting with me and shooting with me. You know I can shoot. He was like, well, you can't do it. And I'm like, all right, when I get home, I said, I'm going to turn on my cell phone and I'm going to film me shooting a golf ball at 100 yards, but I won't shoot it with a rifle. I'll shoot it with a pistol. And he was like, oh, you can't do that, and whatever. So I didn't even have a video camera. I had the first Droid from Verizon. If you remember the first Droid, it was like the biggest, baddest thing that ever came out with like smartphones, because it shot in 720 HD. That was unheard of. And so I set up a golf ball at 100 yards, backed up. I had a Ruger Mark II slap side, and backed up at 100 yards. Second shot, the golf ball went flying. I walked back up to the golf ball to show the hit, and I forgot to hit the record button. So I had to put another golf ball up there. It didn't already have a hole in it. Hit the record button this time. Went back, third shot, golf ball went flying. That was it. I uploaded the video to YouTube. I had to come up with a username really quick. I was shooting a 22, and you know, I just put, you know, when you're shooting a 22, it's called plinking. So I'll be 22plinkster. Upload it to YouTube. Send him the link where he could watch it in Florida, because the file was too big to text to him, and that was it. That's all I wanted YouTube for. That was it. I didn't like speaking in front of cameras. I didn't like speaking in front of crowds. So I knew I could not do YouTube. You know, it never even crossed my mind. But yeah, so that was it. That's how I started. It's all because of Dustin Ellerman in the show Top Shot.
And that's crazy. You know, I've talked to Dustin about that.
And your rifle was you know, what has brought me to this point. Believe it or not, it's kind of strange to think of it that way. But honestly, if it wasn't for your rifle and Dustin pulled that shot off, Dustin wouldn't have won. So therefore, I wouldn't have to recreate that shot, and I would have never made my first YouTube video. So basically, what I'm saying is, Scott, I owe everything to you.
Well, of course. You know, it's crazy. I've talked to Dustin about that shot, and he was a customer of ours before he ever went on to that show. He had bought some of our trigger components for like his various pistols. So when he saw that was the rifle they were going to use, he said, I just wanted to go use it because I knew about it and wanted to get my hands on it. So he started practicing and playing around, you know, out to 100 yards, trying to envision what the producers were going to have them shoot. And he said nobody else picked up that rifle during that competition prior to the day it started. So he said when they went to that golf ball shot, he said, my eyes lit up because he said, I knew I was going to win at that point. He said, because nobody else had taken that shot. They didn't know what their holdover was going to be. They didn't know anything about gold. He said, so he goes, I would have been very disappointed if I didn't win that competition, knowing that I had put the work in. But I never knew that's what spurred you on to your first video.
Yep. That was it. That golf ball shot was the reason why I made my first 2 YouTube videos. And you can go back and watch it if you want to literally just cringe. Like that video is so cringy. But it's honestly, if you would have never made that shot, I would have never made this video, my first video. And I would still be pulling wire and turning screwdrivers right now.
So how do you go from that first video to a few years later saying that's going to be my full-time job?
Dude, that was one of the toughest decisions that I ever had to make. And I believe it was the correct decision even today. So to give you a little bit of background, you may know this, but the people listening, I did security for ADT security for 18 years. It was before the times of now everything is wireless. Right now they'll just send you an alarm system pretty much in the mail, and you can just put double-sided sticky tape on stuff and, call it an alarm system. No, back then everything was it was a lot of relays, a lot of programming. CCTV. I worked on camera systems, fire systems, access control systems. I was a level 5 low voltage technician, and I loved electronics. I was kind of a nerd with electronics. I had a good job. It wasn't, I was never going to be rich, or rich and wealthy are two different things. I was never going to be rich. I was already wealthy. I had healthy kids, I had a roof over my head, and, I had reliable vehicles, but, I wasn't, if we wanted to take a trip to Hawaii, we'd have to save up 5 years for it, kind of a thing. But, I did that, and my whole intentions were to stay with that company forever. I was there for 18 years, and it got to a point before YouTube started getting really crazy with AdSense and earnings and stuff like that. I would work with ADT. I would work Monday through Thursday. I would work 4 tens, and so I was off every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Had 7 weeks paid vacation. They paid my health insurance, gave me company vehicle, cell phone, computer, clothes, tools. So it was a benefit-rich company, but you just didn't bring home a lot of money, And so, I started making YouTube videos, and after 2 years, I made YouTube videos every week, sometimes twice a week, for 2 years before I started making a dime. Because back then you'd have to be like 10,000 subscribers with 100,000 channel views together for you to start making money. So I put in, I was working 3 jobs. I put in the hours to put out, 200 videos before I started making a dime. And that's what people don't understand now. It's like, they just want something instant.
Yes.
That they want to start making videos and hey, I want to start making money doing this. I want to start making money doing it. I'm like, well, I did it for 2 years. And, people now, oh, you're so lucky. You're luckiest person in the world. You got the best job in the world. I'm like, would you work your job for 2 years without ever making a dime? But you saw the big picture, and a lot of people wouldn't dare do that. But I kind of saw the big picture. And so after that first YouTube video, I forgot all about that video. I honestly forgot all about it because, to be honest with you, I had no intentions of ever making another YouTube video as long as I live. And I guess it was probably about 3 weeks after I uploaded the video, and I got an email. Back then, every time you received a comment on a video, Google sent you an email. And so Google sent me an email through YouTube, and it said, so-and-so commented on your video. I'm like, what are they what video are they even talking about? I forgot about the stupid video. And they said, some guy said, nice shot. And I was like, oh, I bet he's talking about that stupid golf ball video. I'm like, other people could actually watch it. I was just sending it to my buddy. I had no idea how YouTube worked. And I looked at it, and I had 96 views in 3 weeks. And I'm like, 96 people wasted their time and watched this video. I'm like, this is the most cringing video on the internet. Well, a couple weeks later, some other guy commented. He said, well, can you split a bullet on an axe blade? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. Well, a week later, he messages me again. He said, well, where's the video? I'm like, oh, I thought you were just asking me if I could split it. You actually want me to film it? Like, they were like, yeah, that's kind of how this YouTube works. We ask you to do something, you make a video. And so I just started making little cheesy 30, 45-second videos in the backyard, just doing really quick trick shots and just having fun doing it. And, that went on for probably about 2 or 3 years. Then after 2 years, I started making a little bit of money. And I like when I say a little bit of money, I'm talking about $250 a month. And so after taxes, you're looking at probably about $175 a month. So I was putting in a lot of hours doing this, only making $175 a month. But I enjoyed doing it. And this went on, and I started making a little bit more money, a little bit more money, a little bit more money doing it. And then, my channel kind of blew up. And when it blew up, for the last, I guess, 2 years, I worked for ADT. I was in 8 to 10 different houses every day, or businesses. And at least 3 times a week, somebody would say, hey, you look really, really familiar. Now, I've got an ADT cap on, ADT, uniform on, khakis or whatever have you. And they're like, your voice and you just look familiar. Are you on the internet? And I'm like, yeah, I make YouTube videos. And I'm like, yeah, you're 22plinkster. I watch your stuff. And so after this started happening like 2 or 3 times a week, and I started making a little bit better money, I was making about equivalent, working 4 days a week than I was making all month with ADT. I said, man, what if I really get serious about doing this? What could it be? And so almost 7 years ago, I took that jump and left, and haven't regretted it for 1 second.
And I'd imagine that, I'm going to back up a little bit. One, I think you have a very valuable lesson in there of it wasn't an overnight success. It was 2 years of putting in work unrewarded. I mean, you were enjoying the work, but you weren't getting monetarily rewarded, I should say.
Exactly. I was getting a pat on the back from complete strangers that I never knew.
And I think people so many times see that, like you said, you have the best job in the world. You go shoot for a living. You go on this hunt or that hunt. But they never understand the hours that go into it to get to that point. But I'm curious, so when you decided to go full-time, you mentioned you had 3 kids, a wife.
2 kids.
2 kids, I'm sorry.
the two that I know about.
So you had 2 kids, a wife. Is this something that your wife was on board with, that you were going to give up? Because you mentioned it was a benefit-rich company. That she was on board with you giving all this up, and
well,
now I'm sure it seems like it'd be an easy decision with how successful you became, but think back 6-7 years ago, that was a completely different world we lived in regard to YouTube and the online social media world.
Yes. So exactly, I'll tell you exactly how it went down. So my wife and I, we talked about it. We talked about me kind of wanting to do this full time. And she was like, listen, I support you, but here's the thing. You don't know, because with YouTube, you may make one amount of money 1 month, and the next month your channel doesn't do good and you kind of tank. We were basically living paycheck to paycheck with about $4,000 in savings. And we weren't spending above our means, but she was a school teacher, and I was working for a benefit rich company. I wasn't bringing home a lot of money. But when you have 2 kids and childcare and clothes and electric bills and water bills, and we didn't have the nicest cars, but my truck, I finally got rid of my truck a couple of years ago, and I had that truck for 18 years. And we weren't in debt, but we were just living paycheck to paycheck. So she goes, I support what you do. However, I don't want you to quit and just do YouTube full time without having another job to fall back on. Like if you could get a good part-time job or get something in the industry and still do YouTube videos, she goes, I guess I would be okay with that. So how it all went down, and this is after talking probably about 4 or 5 times in the past, over a period of 6 months about it. And it was never like we talked about it for an hour or anything. It was like just in passing, like for like 5 minutes or something like that. So how I quit my job, I had no intentions of quitting my job that morning when I walked into work. It was the farthest thing on my mind. My boss there at ADT was one of my really, really, really good friends. And to this day, we still talk. He still texts me at least once a month at 6 o'clock in the morning on Thursdays saying, hey, I don't have your timesheet yet. You need to send in your timesheet. And it's been 7 years since I've worked there. You know, he's just giving me a hard time because I was always late turning in my timesheet. So, but we had a meeting that morning at like 6:30 a.m. And about 7:30 after the meeting was done, he said, hey, I need you to come by my office. I need to give you your yearly evaluation. This was like the first or second week of December. And I was like, all right, whatever. You know, I was just burned out, you know. And so I walk in his office and I sit down, and he opens up his folder and hands me the same folder, and we're going through this. All right, you're doing this really, really good. You're being very productive to this. Now you need to work a little bit on this, but you're doing this really good. So this went on for like 30 minutes. It's the same old corporate spill. You know, you're going to give me my 45 to 50 cent a raise. Just say, hey, you're doing a good job. Keep up the good work. Here's your 50 cents on the hour raise. But no, he has to go through all the corporate spill. So after like 30 minutes, he sets his folder down on the table and on his desk, and I set my folder down. He's like, all right, what do you have to say? And I'm like, I don't have anything to say. He said, I've known you for 18 years. You always have something to say. And I was like, yeah. I was like, dude, my heart's just not in this. I'm just burned out. And he was like, well, he said, I've kind of noticed that the past, 6 to 8 months that your heart's just not in it anymore. And I was like, no, it's just, working 2 jobs, and I'm doing this YouTube thing and all this. And I tried to explain it to him, and he was like, all right, man. He said, I tell you what, he said, I said, I'm not quitting, but I said, I'm gonna go ahead and let you know, I'm going to start looking for another job. And he was like, all right. He said, listen, I'll pray for you. He said, I pray that you make the right decisions. And I'm like, man, I appreciate that. And we shook hands. I walked out of the office, and as I'm walking across the parking lot to my van to go to my first job, I get a phone call. And it was somebody in the industry, and they wanted me to be a online firearms instructor for a college, for a gunsmithing college. And I said, how much do you pay? And they offered me $10,000 more a year than what I was making at ADT. And I'm like, And they're like, when do you want me to start? They said, how about 2 weeks? Like, we need an instructor now. And I'm like, okay. I say, how many hours a week? Because I want to do this YouTube thing. He said, it take you about 15 to 20 hours a week. And I was like, all right, so that gives me 20 more hours to focus on YouTube. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. So I walked right back into the office, knocked on my boss's door. I'm like, officially giving my 2 weeks notice. It happened just like that.
That is crazy.
And he said, man, I just got through saying amen. I was praying for you. I'm like, well, the Lord worked pretty quick on this time. So I walk out of the office after I gave him my 2 weeks notice, and I sat in the van, fixed to go to my first job, and it just felt like this huge burden lifted off of me because I'm finally doing what I wanted to do. And my wife called. It was her lunch break, and she was like, hey, how's your day going? I'm like, all right, I just quit my job. She said, what? And I said, yeah, I just quit ADT. She goes, no, really? Like, what? Like, we got plans tonight, so where do you want to go? I'm like, no, we need to back up. She didn't believe me. I said, I quit my job. She goes, what do you want to do? And I explained to her. She goes, well, if that's what you want to do. And so I worked for the college for 2 years and still did YouTube. And then after that, I was like, I need to devote 100% time to shooting. So, and that's what I did.
I don't think I've ever heard that part of the story. That's incredible.
Yeah.
They always say, put what you want out in the universe, and it's amazing how often it'll happen.
Yep.
Which is, a credit to you being able to have that conversation with your boss who was a friend and just being honest and real, saying, hey, this is where my head's at. This is where my heart's at. And it may not always happen in 10 to 15 minutes like it did for you.
But, the funny thing is, we're still really good friends. We go out to eat a couple of times a year. We catch up on things. And still, hey, your job's still here if you want to come back. Like he said, I'll hire you right now. And I'm like, he said, and I'll just look at him. I'm like, I know there's no way you're coming back, but I want to offer you the job. And I'm like, dude, it would be, I'm like, I would come back and work for free. and still do YouTube because I enjoyed my job so much. I love doing it. But like, again, you just come to a point in your life, like there's people that will just, and don't take this the wrong way. There's nothing wrong with this, but there are people that will just be content working for someone that will take care of them. Some people would just do that, and that's okay. That's okay. But there's some people that are kind of an entrepreneur and kind of a risk taker that's saying, hey, I'm going to do this. It may cost me everything, but I want to do this. And they jump and they find out what they love to do, and they open up their own business. And, some of them take off, some of them fail. If all this is gone tomorrow, man, it was fun. That's how I would see it. Man, it was fun. I'll go back turning screwdrivers and pulling wire. No big deal.
Well, and that's like, there's just so many lessons there of, like you said, some people are perfectly happy being content, working their 9 to 5. They leave their job at 5. They don't have to worry about it again until the next morning. And then there's others that, they just know there's something more out there that they want to do. Mm-hmm. But it does come with a risk, like you said, of possibly losing it all, losing the comfort of the, regular routine paycheck, and all of a sudden relying on YouTube to pay you, and it goes up and down. You don't know what you're going to get. And I assume back then, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there wasn't all the demonetization of different videos and stuff back then, was there? No. Like they start doing in recent years?
Yeah, so it lasted. Let me see. When I went into YouTube full time, I remember I started YouTube full time in January the 1st. I think that was like 2015. I think 2015, 2016, and I've been doing YouTube full time for 6 months, and then I started getting flags, and I watched my earnings drop 95% overnight just because they had a firearm in them. 95%. And so, what really bothered me during that time point is myself, along with other firearm YouTubers like Iraq Veteran and Military Arms Channel and Hickok 45 and Demolition Ranch and all these other guys, we kind of made a video, like our own little video. I'm like, hey, listen, they're attacking us because we have firearms. Now most of us was showing firearms in a responsible manner. We weren't doing stupid things with them or anything like that. And so, but people, it was really, really funny how people would some people would be supportive, but then again, there was that handful of people saying, dude, you're making videos. You shouldn't be getting paid for this anyway. Quit whining and just make videos. And I'm like, well, you don't understand. This was our job. So basically what you're saying is like, you go into your boss the next day where you work, and it's like, listen, it's okay that you cut my salary by 95%. And I'm only going to be making 5% of my income, and I'm going to continue to do the same amount of work that I'm doing just because, you want to do it. And it's okay. I'm happy being here. So I'm just going to work 5% of what you usually pay me. But I want to continue to do a good job. And people didn't understand that because they think that YouTube was just a hobby. Now, for a lot of us, it's a full-time job.
Well, and I know
it's a lot of work.
By this time, the production value of all those guys you mentioned, had gone way up too, from your very first one that you shot with a droid. Yeah.
I'm running, on every single video, I'm running $20,000 worth of camera gear and audio gear. And it's expensive. And that stuff you've got to upgrade every 2 to 3 years. Because either it goes out or, I went from 720 to 1080 30 frames per second. Then I went to 1080s 60 frames per second. Then I went to 4K 30 frames per second. Now everything's 4K, 60 frames a second. And people are used to seeing quality go up. Once that quality and production quality and value starts going down, they start turning you off. So it's a rat race, man. You've always got to try to make the last video look better than the one before. in my book anyways. So it's difficult. It's a lot of things that people don't think about that just watch YouTube videos. But say for instance, Scott, you give me a firearm to show the world, and you have given me a lot of firearms in the past years to show the world, because I'm a big fan of courts and firearms. I have been for a very long time, and that's no secret. And when you give me a firearm, I put 2,000 rounds through that firearm before I even turn on the camera. So I've put in, not only the amount of money that worth of ammunition, but I am sponsored by federal CCI. But for a long time, I was buying my own ammunition. And, I put in the time. I put in, I know what the pistol's going to do, where it's going to shoot, or what the rifle's going to do, or how it's going to shoot. And then I turn on the camera. And then after I film the video, I do all the B-roll. Then after that, I put it on the editing board. I edit it, then I upload it, and I babysit it, and I answer the questions. And, one video, I could have 30 to 40 hours in one video. And it's very easy to do. But people don't see that. They just see the 9-minute video that you just uploaded. So I take my job very seriously.
Yeah, and it definitely you can tell that when you watch your videos that it's something that you are definitely passionate about. But you brought up something there, mentioned that you're sponsored by CCI Federal right now. And that's another thing I'm sure that people that don't understand how the industry works are like, well, yeah, it's easy because you have this sponsorship, all the ammo sent to you. But I assume, it goes back to having to put all that work in and becoming noticed before, CCI Federal is going to go to you and say, hey, we want to work a deal. Is that something they came to you, or you went to them looking for a sponsor?
I went to them. CCI and Federal, they started helping me. You remember when you couldn't find 22 ammunition the first time?
Yes.
So right before it was starting to get bad, I bought 2 cases of Federal 745, because back then I was shooting. It was a few gun reviews here and there, but it was mostly trick shots. And, my Colt Woodsman loved 36 grain Federal Champion ammunition at about 30 to 50 feet, depending on the trick shot. And so I bought 2 cases of that, which was 10,000 rounds. Well, I was down to 2 boxes, 1,000 rounds to my name. And I'm like, I can't find this stuff anywhere, like nowhere. And so it was the first Iraq veteran shoot ever, and went down to Georgia. And Eric came up to me and said, hey, here's this guy that works for Federal. And he said, if you need anything, just let him know. Well, I didn't know how the industry really worked. I thought, hey, he's got a business, a desk phone. Cell phone went on him, so I'm just going to call him on his desk phone. I didn't know how the industry worked. Nobody sits at their desk. Everybody answers emails on the run. That's how work gets done. So I tried to call this guy on his desk phone for like 3 weeks, every day for 3 weeks. He never answered his phone. And I'm like, all right, I'm mad. Obviously, this guy was not serious. So I'm just going to I'm just going to try one more. And if he doesn't answer, so what? So I called him and he answered. We talked about it. He was like, yeah, I can get you some ammo. I was like, well, how much? He was like, no, I can get you some ammo. Just make sure that you mention that it's Federal ammo. I was like, well, I've shot Federal CC my whole life. That's all I will shoot. And he was like, well, that's fine. So they sent me ammo for like 3 years, not a whole bunch. And, we dated pretty much. And I tried for 3 years for them to sign with me. I'm like, hey, why don't you just sign with me? I'll be exclusive Federal CCI for 3 years. No, we're not going to do it. No. And when I went full time, I was like, listen, I'm full time now. This is how serious I am. They were like, all right, let's do it. But, beforehand, I was buying all that ammo. I stocked up. I had a rule of thumb that I never had under 25,000 rounds of 22 on me when I was buying it, like in my possession. And I would take because with security, you would be on call once a week, meaning if a business alarm went off or like their fire alarms going off like crazy at like an Applebee's or something like that, they would have to call an on-call technician, and you could get called out at 2:00 in the morning. Well, one of my friends at ADT did not like to be called out, so he would give me $20 just to take his on call. And so every week I would take that $20, go immediately and buy 2 boxes of 22 with it. Because back then you could buy, a 550 brick at Walmart for, I think, $10.50. So that's how I stocked up my ammo for years. I put in the extra work to make me a better shot. So I didn't like being called out in the middle of the night, but $20 was $20.
Yeah. So there's, so many little things that you've said that have led you to where you got today, that I think, even me knowing you for several years, it's a lot of stuff that I never realized all the steps you went through to get to the point you're at now. So, well,
yeah, it's kind of funny looking back on it. And it's like, I've just been blessed. Everything was just laid out there for me, but I had to work for it. It wasn't given to me. And that's what people don't understand. It's a lot of work. I work twice as much doing YouTube full time than I ever did with ADT, because I could have clocked in at ADT at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'd clock out at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening, and that was it. Clock in, unless I was on call. Here with social media, no, you're babysitting posts and Instagram posts, Twitter posts, Facebook posts, YouTube questions from the time you wake up, and emails from the time you wake up, from the time you go to bed. It's a 16-hour job. And you can't get away from it, because it's like, all right, I'm gonna put my phone down for a week. And like, you can't do that, because all that stuff adds, backs up, emails back up, direct messages back up. And
and as soon as you do that, there's somebody else out there that's answering those questions that's going to take your spot. If you're not answering them, giving feedback, doing that, I assume there's somebody else out there that's going to try to work harder.
Yep.
And take over those fans or viewers of your videos. So that kind of leads to my next question. My next question is, the one thing I know is that you are super competitive. Whether it's
whether it's too competitive at times.
Yes, whether it's when you played basketball, shooting. Now you're into disc golf. Whatever you do, I know that we've had these conversations about how competitive you are. So first question, do you think that competitiveness is what allowed you to get to where you are now?
Oh, absolutely. I played organized sports ever since probably first grade, second grade, basketball, soccer, played in college for a couple years in basketball. And, after that, I coached for about 8 years, played in leagues and everything else. And, now this 42-year-old decrepit body with no knees can't do that anymore. But, you can always pass on knowledge of what you've learned to a younger generation. But yeah, I never want, and I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, and it was about disc golf, believe it or not. I took up disc golf about a year ago, and I really, really like it. And I told him, I'm like, listen, because they were like, hey, are you going to try really hard and try to go pro and like play all these tournaments and stuff? I'm like, no, like, I just want to get to the point that I can be competitive and beat 80% of the people that I play against. I said, to get to that level where you are beating the 20%, that other 20%, it takes a different level of practice and determination. It has to consume you. And I said, I don't want to do that at 42 years old. I said, I don't have the time to do that. I don't have the resources to do that. I just want to beat 80% of the people that I play against. I don't care if it's in ping pong or if it's at pool or if it's at darts, disc golf, basketball, whatever. I want to beat 80% of the people I play against. But, shooting is a different story. With precision shooting, I want to beat 100% of the people that I shoot against, just because I've already put in the time and the work effort and stuff like that. But these young people with these still challenges, like, I will never get there. And I know that. That's why I don't practice it. You've got the Colbys and the and who's the young person who won it 2 years ago?
Nate Gibson.
Yes, Nate. And Nate's been out here at the house. Like, I can't get to that level at 42 years old. Like, there is no way. Like, even if I practice for 5 hours a day, you start losing a lot of those motor skills.
Yes.
That hand-eye coordination, that speed. So I know I'll never be him, but I guarantee you one thing, I can sit there and look at my front sight for 10 seconds and squeeze off the trigger and hit things that he can't hit. Because that's that's where I'm at this point, because I'll never have the speed now because of my age, but precision, I can still hold my own.
But I'll give you credit. I know being that competitive, a couple years ago, you decided to shoot the World Rimfire Steel Challenge match.
Yes.
Which I know in talking to you, you wrestle with that decision because of your competitiveness, and then also being able to look at it and say, there's zero chance that I'm going to go out and beat Nate or Colby or Grant Kunkel, whoever, the top shooter at the time is. So did that bother you, or were you concerned at all that was going to hurt your, the 22plinkster persona, that you were putting yourself out there in a shooting event that you knew you were not going to be competing at the very top with them?
Dude, I'm not going to lie, Scott. I struggled with it. I honestly struggled with it because I turned that event down for 2 years in a row because I'm like, all right, there's going to be cameras on me. There's going to be people talking to me. I'm going to have a crowd of people wanting to watch me shoot. And this is not my forte. This is, speed shooting and precision shooting are two different things. And finally, I just said, you know what? Life's short. Let me try it. Let me just go out there and have fun. And I had 2 goals in that competition. What was it, like 140 people competing, something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, 140, 160, something like that. So when I got there, I'm like, I don't want to finish last, and I don't want to be disqualified. Those are the 2 things. I'm like, if I don't get disqualified and if I don't finish last, it was a success for me. So, and I think I ended up shooting 62 out of 140.
Yeah.
And never doing it before. It was fun. And I look back and I had people video me shooting stages and stuff, and I'm like, oh my word. If I would have just slowed down right there, or if I would have hit that shot, I could have finished in the top 40, because it's just about a matter of a few seconds once you add all those numbers up until you get to the top 5. The top 5 is where everything is separated. But I didn't care about being in the top 5. I just didn't want to get disqualified. And, I didn't want to finish last, and I did neither of those. So life was good.
Well, I give you a lot of credit because I know that wasn't an easy decision for you. But like you said, life's short. You stepped out of your comfort zone. And I think, I know that was a match that we were down at and we had a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. Hanging out. And to me, it gives me an appreciation of how good those top few shooters are.
Yes.
Because, you watch a guy like you who's been around guns since you said you were 5, and obviously you focused on the precision side of things. But then to see somebody, like that, and then see how much faster some of these guys were, just gives you an appreciation of how hard they've worked and how quick their reflexes are. And like you said, they're also 16, 17, 18 years old, so a little younger than we are.
Yeah, it blows my mind. It just, they're athletes. You call them what you want to call them, but, when you try to take a skill that, like shooting, and you have perfected that skill to be, one of the top shooters in the world, they're athletes. You don't have to dribble a basketball or catch a football or, hit a golf ball to say you're an athlete. Shooting is an athletic sport, 3-gun and, your skill challenges and long range shooting and stuff like that, because it's mental and it's physical. And the mental is just as demanding as the physical. So there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work that goes into that, and they're true athletes, man.
I would completely agree with that. I think that's what makes it so fun to watch.
100%. It's not fun to shoot against them, but it is fun to watch.
Well, you notice I didn't shoot against them.
And the thing is, I'm old enough to be all these kids' dads, and it's just like, it's humbling is what it is.
Well, I know they like to give me a hard time because, yes, I'm old enough to be, they could all be my kids as well. So, but that's one of the things I enjoy about it, is it's so much fun and a lot of good nature ribbing going back and forth.
Mm-hmm. And if they start running their mouth about out shooting me with speed and stuff like that, I'll either challenge them to precision or disc golf or ping pong. They won't beat me at ping pong, I promise you that. There's so many other things that I can challenge them to, and I can feel better about myself beating them. So they got me on one thing, but I'll get them on several.
That's awesome.
It's just I'm competitive, man. I don't like losing. I'm not a sore loser, but while I'm in the moment, I want to compete, and I am one of the biggest trash talkers you'll ever meet in your life. And I don't really do it to get into people's head. I do it just to be funny, just to kind of lighten the mood. Now, the basketball court was a different story, but when it comes to something like this among friends, you just jab at them a little bit, kind of get in their head a little bit, but that's what kind of makes it fun.
That does make it fun. So just a couple more questions and I'll let you go. The one thing that I've noticed in talking to you is, for being in our industry for a relatively short time, you seem to have been able to network and connect with a lot of different people in the industry. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to people that are trying to, whether it be a sponsored shooter, somebody that's trying to become a social media influencer, or somebody that's just trying to break into our industry, I guess is a better question. What's the best way to try to connect and reach out to those various people that you have been able to connect to?
Well, to be honest with you, the biggest thing that I can tell you to do, because I get asked the question all the time, hey, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. What should I do? How who should I call to get this stuff and this stuff and this stuff? And I'm like, well, listen, you're looking at it the wrong way. I'm like, no company's going to really look at you when you have like 50 followers. I'm like, put in the work, put in the time. And once you get big enough and you start having a following, those companies will come to you. Like, I don't reach out to companies at all to do work. They come to me. Now, there's been a couple of times like, hey, I get a lot of questions about a certain firearm that's not, that's out, and I'll contact the company at that point just because it's not something that I really want to do, but I know it's what my viewers want to see. So I'll reach out to them, but that's only probably like once a year, if that. But most of the time, I get between 800 and 1,000 emails a day. And it's a lot of companies that want to send me, holsters and, ammunition and just, orange handle for doodly bobs. People want to send you everything just to get their product in front of your followers. But, the biggest thing that I can tell them to do is, put in the work. Don't expect, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Don't ever go into that mindset. Go into the mindset, hey, I'm having fun. I enjoy doing this. And your followers will see that you enjoy doing it. And that will make them coming back for more. If you go in there as a commercial at, trying to sell this or trying to sell that, I don't, people all the time say that, well, you're just paid for it. You're just a shill. All this stuff's a paid for, a paid review. I'm like, nope, I've never done a paid review as long as I live, ever. There's a production quality that costs money. And I tell them, I'm like, if the gun's bad, I'm not going to show it, and I'm going to send it back to you. Or if this product is bad, and you don't know how many times I've had to do that. And, I turn down money by doing that. But at the same time, whatever's on my channel, whatever people see, it's a product that I believe in. So, and then I've got to take the time and the effort and pay a cameraman and a photographer. And, my time is valuable also, especially when the YouTube earnings aren't like what they need to be at all. So there's a lot of stuff to it, but don't, when people want to get into this stuff, don't go into the mindset saying, hey, I want to be a YouTuber. Just go out and have fun. And as you get bigger, people are going to come to you. You don't have to go to them.
Well, and I think that's one of the secrets to your success is you can tell you're having fun, but you're the same person for the most part on camera as you are off camera, whether you're having dinner, you're at a range, whatever you're doing. So you're just being you.
Yeah. I don't have to put on a wig and a pair of glasses and pretend to be another character in a video.
Correct. You are just who you are, which I think is, like I said, I think that's part of the secret to your success and why you've grown to over 700,000 subscribers versus where sometimes you see other people who they get started, they may have a few followers early and then just fizzle out because people get to see them off the range or off camera and it may not be the same person.
No, it's not. And, there's, I'm not picking on, I'm debating whether to say this, but I'm not picking on Demolition Ranch. Matt is a good friend of mine. I have known Matt for a long, long time. We've done videos together. So I've probably known Matt for probably about 8 years. I consider Matt a good friend, but Matt's personality on camera is not his same personality in real life. He is very quiet in real life. I remember the first couple of times we hung out, he's like, it was like fighting tooth and nails just to get a word out of him. But, as soon as that camera came on, man, he could ramp it up and he can engage the audience and make you sit on the end of your seat. I wish I could do that. So I'm kind of jealous of him for being able to do that. But, I guess I'm just not that smart or either that smart or that talented to be able to do that. But, it's not a jab to him. It's not anything negative. It's actually a compliment, that I could do something like that because I can't, the skits that he does and stuff in front of his videos just have me cracking up sometimes, but that's not him in real life. You talk to him and he's like really, really quiet. But I think it's great.
Yes, it is. So one final question that I like to ask, and this is maybe not industry or business related, might be more personal related. But for me, I believe that all of us can look to one event, like a river changing moment that has either sets us up for success or even failure sometimes. And many times this moment will initially send us down the path of uncertainty, but it may also be that same event that leads us, that event after that path of uncertainty eventually leads us to a path of success. For you, can you pinpoint to one event or one moment that has kind of been the catalyst for where everything is now?
Yeah, I can relate everything on our first conversation, Scott. It's all because of you is where I'm at.
Well, you're the only one.
It's hard to say, one specific thing because, doing what I do and, especially trying to have, when I did all trick shots, every week you would have to try to do something more difficult. You was always having to one up the next week. And some shots that I would pull off, people would be like, holy cow, wow, that's awesome. How did you do that? And knowing in the back of my mind, that shot really wasn't that difficult. It was all about the effect of the shot, how I built up the shot, leading up to the shot. One of the most I got to be careful. My wife's a teacher. I've got to watch my grammar here. I almost said most proudest. I just said the proudest moment probably ever of any trick shot that I've ever had was my buddy. He chipped a golf ball up in the air and I shot it out of the air with a 1963 Colt Woodsman. Now it took me a bunch of shots to do that because he's a horrible golfer. 1 minute the ball would be 15 feet in the air, and granted we were shooting in the side of a bank, like a mountain, so there was I wasn't shooting up in the air. But 1 minute the golf ball would be 20 feet in the air, next minute it'd be 5 feet off the air, but I remember doing that shot and thinking to myself, this is going to be nearly impossible. And after I think it took me about 18 shots and I finally hit it, that for me gave me confidence from to this day, and never look at a shot saying, hey, it can't be done. I go into shots and say, I wonder if it can be done, because I've had trick shots that I've tried to do that I just can't pull off, because a lot of the stuff that I do and shoot is determined by 1/1000th of an inch. If I'm off 1/1000th of an inch, the shot is unsuccessful. So, it's pretty it's that shot with the golf ball, him chipping the golf ball in there, that was probably the most rewarding shot. And that video's only got like 5,000 views or 6,000 views. It's not a highly viewed video. No, not compared to, some of the trick shots I've done that have millions of views. But it's that one right there was probably the most rewarding.
Well, that's awesome. And I'm going to have to make sure and go check that one out. And
if you want to fall asleep, because again, I'm filming with a $20 Sony Handycam in my cell phone. So, but go ahead. Just after we get off the phone, I would send you the link. It'll keep you from having to search through other painful videos of mine early on.
But I think, your whole story, there's just so many lessons and takeaways that people, whether it be YouTube or anything that they want to do in life, I think it just shows that if you put the time in, put the work in, and like you just said recently here, have the confidence that you can do it. There's a lot more that people can achieve, I think, than sometimes we give ourselves credit for. Because like you said, 10 years ago, you didn't want to get in front of a camera. You didn't want to speak. You were going to do one video and that was it. And now it's how most of us know you is through that.
Yeah.
It completely changed your life.
Dave, I'm just a regular redneck. So,
well, once again, thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time. Everybody, if you want to go check out his videos, it is just 22plinkster. And I think that's your Instagram handle as well, isn't it? Just 20.
Yeah. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
And make sure you send him a lot of DMs and stuff so he has something to do at night.
And if you send me a DM that says, "Hey, I'm looking to buy my first gun, what should I get?" Like, I won't answer that, because I'm like, what kind of gun? If you're going to ask a question, ask very specific questions like, "Hey, I'm looking to buy my first 22 pistol for competition," or "I'm looking to buy my first 22 rifle for hunting." Be specific with those questions, because if not, I'm just going to go right through them.
I think you bring up a great point that, you get asked those questions a lot. I know other people have the same issue, but there's zero context around it, so it's an impossible question to answer.
Yeah.
Like you said, is it for competition? Is it for self-defense? Is it for, teaching your son or daughter how to shoot? There's so many,
I used to, and this is so bad of me, but sometimes I'm kind of a smart butt sometimes, as you know.
No, really.
And sometimes I'll get those questions like, "Hey, I'm looking to buy my first gun. What should I get?" And I always put Desert Eagle. They're like, "Oh, really?" I'm like, "No, not really." Like, what kind of gun are you looking for? So it's just, if you ask questions, just make them brief, specific, and to the point, and I will try to get back to them.
That sounds.
And if I don't, it's not because I don't love you. It's just because I'm probably playing disc golf or making a video or doing something else or a podcast or something.
Well, that sounds good. Thank you again, Dave. I appreciate your time.
Not a problem, Scott. Thanks for having me on.